Well, good evening to everyone and good morning from San Francisco. I want to welcome you all to our third case discussion on Verily Life Sciences. I'll just wait for a few seconds to give other people a chance to log in before I begin. So, yesterday was Finnish Independence Day, and I hope those of you who are Finnish had a nice celebration. That's the reason why we moved the class from Monday to Tuesday. And I'd like to start with some administrative issues before we get into the Verily Life Sciences case. So let me go to Moodle first. And I want to share my screen. So I hope the screen is visible. I'm looking at the tab Exam Info, and last time when we met in Zoom, there were some questions about the scheduling of the exam. So Luke has now posted these. There's a PDF called Exam Instructions, which is self-explanatory. The important thing is the dates and times of the three exams. Our first one is on Thursday, 16th December, 1800 to 2100 Finnish time. But then if somebody can't make that, then we have another exam too on Thursday, 12th January from 1300 to 1600. This time was designed to meet the needs of people like Vesa, who said that they have parental responsibilities and it's difficult for them to do an evening exam. So we now have an afternoon exam, and then there's another one in February. So this is the exam information. Let me pause and see if you have any questions or comments about the exams itself. And by the way, if anybody is willing to put on their cameras, I would find that useful. Thank you, Stefan. So I guess there are no questions about the exam. Please sign up so that we have an estimate of how many people are going to be on the exam, and then make sure all your cameras are working, because this exam is supervised online in Zoom. And then I want to show you that we have one more Zoom session. It's called Webinar 4. Let me share my screen again. So Webinar 4 is on the 13th of December, and there's actually 3 articles that you have to read. There's nothing, there's no memo to be submitted or any video to be prepared, but you have these 2 articles which are very interesting. The whole session next, the last one, Webinar 4, is about new technologies. So already today you've been introduced to AI and machine learning in the Verily case, but this article goes more into depth on what are the differences between AI and ML. Then we're going to have another very detailed article on Bitcoin and blockchain. And then I have another article, a case actually, a case study on Uber just for reading. And I don't see that posted here. So I wanted to ask you if have you got the Uber case from Luke, or you had only 3 cases? Because I did intend to have a discussion on Uber on the 13th of December. So Tam, I'll get to your question in just a moment in the chat. But first I want to know from you all, do you have access to the Uber case for December 13th? It was supposed to be distributed along with the 3 other cases that you did. Like the Verily Life Sciences case, it was the 4th case. But there is no memo or video to be prepared. It was just for reading and discussion. So could you please take a look and see if you have the Uber case? Otherwise, I'll have to get in touch with Luke and tell him to order and distribute it for you all.
Is it supposed to be on the email or
How did you get the first 3 cases from Luke? I think it might have been on email because I don't see it posted here in Moodle.
It
it was
actually on the Moodle in the section intro to case method, but
Uh-huh.
here's there are only 3 cases. So I suppose that the Uber one is something different that is not available on Moodle.
Okay. So
yeah,
thank you for
I also
letting.
never I also I haven't came across of that case as well. And I'm checking all the emails from Luke. There is nothing there.
Okay. Thank you, Tam and Stefan, for confirming that you haven't got the Uber case. I will make a note that Luke will send you the Uber case in the next couple of days, and then you will have that for. You just have to read it and understand it. There is no assignment due. So it will be a good application of AI and machine learning to the car sharing service. Okay, Tam, I see your question. May I ask what type of questions will be covered in the exam? Sure. So it will be another case, a 5th case, something that you haven't done before, right? You will have to read that case during the exam, and then instead of writing a memo, there will be some 4 questions on the case itself, short essay type questions, which will essentially involve some kind of understanding of the problem and the alternatives and some recommendations. But you don't have to write it in a memo format. There are specific questions and you will have to answer those questions. And I want to encourage you to bring in course concepts into the answers. Okay, so demonstrate an understanding of all the theory that was discussed in the earlier part of the course. So it would help to refresh some of the basic theory on high-tech marketing. The different types of uncertainties and the different kinds of strategies that may be applicable in a high-tech environment. So it'll be four short questions, and you have to type them into the form in Moodle. So you will have to answer online, and you'll have all of 3 hours to read the case and answer the questions.
I see. Very clear. Thank you.
Okay. Any other administrative issues that we might like to address right now? Have you all been able to sign up for the exam date of your choice? If not, I would encourage you to do that as soon as possible. Okay, So we have only 9 participants today. I guess the attendance is declining as the end of the semester approaches, because you all have so many courses and projects and exams to do. But I'm happy that there's at least 8 of you who are interested in the Verily Life Sciences case. So now we will watch. There's 3 groups, 7, 8 and 9, who have prepared videos on Verily. I posted them on Moodle. I hope you had a chance to review them. But just to recap our memory, I will play them again on the web. So please bear with me. I'm going to load up group number 7's video presentation. We'll go through it first and then we'll come back and discuss it.
Hello everyone, my name is Dangwoo. Together with my colleagues, Elena, Laura, and Ake, we will together present our findings and recommendations for Verily. So first of all, it is important to understand the problem that the firm is dealing with. Verily recently has successfully built up an algorithm using machine learning technology in image analysis. Now they wonder how to translate this into an optimal business model. They have to deal with a number of key challenges, including the fierce competition. Verily was not the only firm that has discovered this technology. In fact, there are many firms that had already successfully built up and effectively commercialized the technology. Besides those small and medium enterprise, there are some tech giants, typically Apple and Amazon, have also entered the game. So the question is like how the firms can translate this technology to an optimal business model that not only generates significant revenue, but also sets some entry barrier to the incoming players. Then they have to deal with some data concerns like how to efficiently gain data access and data curations. And the last one is some regulatory concerns regarding some privacy, data security regulation. So together we build up a question is that how can Verily translate the machine learning technology in image analysis into an optimal business model that will maximize the revenue while solving those issues mentioned above? Now my colleague Elena will continue.
Thank you, Tam. We have considered 2 solutions on how to monetize the business model. However, we have to analyze which strategy would be better, the brownfield strategy or the greenfield strategy. The brownfield strategy means that the business model would be sold to existing healthcare systems and companies. The greenfield strategy means that Verily would create a novel business model to support the technology. And next slide, please. We found that the strength for this brownfield strategy would be that it would be the so-called easier option compared to the greenfield strategy, as Verily doesn't, for example, have to do market research and invest resources in building a brand. There would also be less risks involved in this strategy. If Verily were to sell the technology, they could reinvest the sales profits into new projects. There are a few weaknesses considering the brownfield strategy. There might be challenges in selling the technology. Verily also has to consider the fact that they missed the opportunity of building their brand and a new business model. They have to consider whether selling the technology is worth of losing the ownership of the technology. And next, Ake will continue.
Thanks. An alternative option to Verily is to use Greenfield investment strategy. This is a foreign direct investment where a company establishes operations in a foreign country. In Greenfield investment, everything has to start up from the scratch. Advantages of Greenfield investment strategy is that if Verily would execute this, it would have high level of control over its business operations, high control over its brand image and staff, and this also has major earning potential, and it also creates domestic employment opportunities for Verily. And some weaknesses: this is an extremely high risk investment. This is the riskiest form of FDI. Barriers to entry in desired country, so potential high market entry cost and also high fixed cost involved in a greenfield location. Thank you.
Thank you, Ake. And next, about our recommendations. So we would recommend Verily to choose the greenfield strategy that Ake just introduced before. Our suggestion would be to create a diabetic eye screening service, which would be offered for health service providers such as private clinics and health centers. The service would be focused on B2B markets. We would not only be selling the technology, but creating a service where Verily's personnel run the testing for diabetes and scan the pictures. And this would be done in close cooperation with FDA to make sure all regulations are achieved. This would also be a desirable solution regarding privacy concerns, since Verily receives only the patient information from the customer company, then gathers the data and analyzes it, and provides the results for the customer company, which then contacts the patient. Therefore, Verily does not need to invest in customer service of the patients. It only is in contact with the health centers and takes care of the technology part. This way, Verily can gain revenue in a cost-efficient manner. And that was our recommendations. Thank you.
Okay, I hope the video showed quite okay. No glitches in looking at the video. So now we can turn to the discussion. What is it that you liked about both the presentation style as well as the substance? Let's give them some positive feedback. Who would like to start the discussion? I guess everyone's hesitating to go first, so let me get the ball rolling. I think that it was a very efficient presentation. They delved straight into the problem. They had two alternative solutions and then they made their recommendations. So although it was brief, it was to the point, and I think if you're presenting something to upper management, they would appreciate the efficiency. So I like that. I think the visuals were quite nice. It showed a little bit about the scientific bent of Verily with all the math on the title slide and so on. So those were some of the positive aspects that I noted. Let's see. Let's invite comments from other class members as well. I see Ina has made a comment. The picture about the business model in the last slide was nicely done. Easy to understand and short to read though. Right. So the last slide recommendation is what Ina liked, because again it was to the point and brief and quite effective. Let's invite some other comments. What did you guys think about? Any positive feedback for the team? You can either use the chat or you can also use the microphone, whatever is easy. Okay, I don't see any more on that topic. So let's go on to constructive critique. What is it that this team could have improved, or are there any parts of their arguments that you might like to take issue with and disagree? So why don't we go to that next part of the discussion? How could this team improve? Any comments? So again, I see some hesitation in going first. Oh, okay. I see Ina has written the first comment. Thank you, Ina. Did I understand correct that the Verily personnel would be there using the algorithm and reading the pictures? Interesting idea, but quite heavy to execute. Yeah, so this is something that the team has to address. Could anybody in the team clarify the answer to Ina's question when you said that, they should launch a B2B service, providing the algorithm to healthcare clinics and so on? Did you mean that Verily should recruit the personnel, or is it that just supply the equipment and software, and then the healthcare clinics have to provide the personnel? So would anybody from group 7 like to answer the question?
Yes, well, our idea was that the company would provide the whole service, that they would also do the reading and the scanning of the pictures, and that they would get the patient information from the health centers and their customers, and then they would do the analyzing and then send the results back to the health centers that would contact the patients.
Thank you, Laura, for that clarification. So it will require investment, no question about it. So they are prepared to make that investment. Very good. Let's go on to any other comments anybody has. What might you offer by way of constructive critique to this team? All right, let me offer my comments. I think the presentation itself could have been, more effective if we had the video embedded of the speakers. I've said that in the past. Here you had just blanks and the names of the people. But, whenever the audience is not very familiar with who the speakers are, it's always nice to have that embedded video. So that's one area that you might want to focus on in your future video efforts. Let me also now go into some of the slides actually.
Hi. Hello, hello.
Sorry, I'm not getting that. Where's my, here it is. Just bear with me a moment while I load up this video again.
Hello.
Right. So I'm looking at the problem definition, and it says that the focus should be on converting the or translating the image analysis machine learning technology into a business model. And so, this is quite on point and focused on the digital retinopathy algorithm, which, is the main kind of short-term issue. But I also think there is a longer-term problem definition about the business model of the whole company across all their projects. So I think it's a two-stage problem. There's the immediate problem with how to get money and monetize the digital retinopathy algorithm, but there's also this overall business model that verily seems to be operating more as a research public university, where they're just doing all these long-term projects and there's not any model for getting financially viable. So I think that could be another layer on top of this one in terms of the problem definition. That's one point. Another point is, if I go to the alternatives, you had two, right? You had the brown field and then you had the green field. The brown field is fairly clear. I had a question about the green field. So when Ake presented this, he made reference to FDI and a foreign country. So I know that this, you probably studied this in the context of international business and going overseas and making foreign direct investments. But here it gives the impression that your solution is about verily going abroad. But what about the US market? Is that something that you are willing to ignore? So there was some confusion there. I think the green field and brown field could apply even to domestic markets. It's just a matter of how much you are willing to invest in it. So I think it created a little bit of confusion in bringing in the references to FDI and foreign countries. So that would be my second comment. And then in terms of the recommendations,
It would be better.
oops,
The brownfield strategy
let me go to the recommendations. Right. So the second bullet point says offer the B2B screening service. I think this is a very bold decision to offer the whole service, right? From nuts to bolts. The comment of Ina was valid in the sense that it's going to, require a huge investment. And so your assumption, I think, is that those funds will be available. And, if this were part of the main Google, then I think you can assume that it's got deep pockets, but Verily is kind of a separate business unit and it has to stand on its own. So they are not generating any great profits at the moment. In fact, the exhibit shows that other bets are always losing money. So in that sense, you have to address the investment issue. Where are you going to raise the funds from for the B2B full service? And then secondly, I would like to see some more, recommendations on what kind of private clinics and health centers. I mean, there's a whole, that's such a big market, right? So what kind of private healthcare centers, public versus private, or the size, small, medium versus large? So I think the targeting issue could use some more development here. So those are some of the comments that I had, which I hope can help in future efforts. But let's give another round to anybody who would like to add some comments, constructive comments, to group number 7 for the substantive aspects of their presentation, the problem definition or the alternative solutions or the recommendations. You can use the chat or use your mic. And don't feel shy, anybody who makes a comment, you're actually contributing to the learning of the group. I don't see any more comments forthcoming from the class. So now let me ask group number 7 to react to any of the feedback that's been provided either by me or anybody else. Ina provided some feedback as well. Any reactions from group 7?
Well, I would like to say thank you for the feedback, and I think this was the hardest case of all the cases. So I have to admit that I found it quite difficult, but I think the feedback was on point, and also about the greenfield part that we consider the international aspect. So we should probably have concentrated more in the US market, like you said.
Okay, thank you, Elena, for your reactions. Yeah, the issue about the domestic versus international is that this is such a new thing, right? And Google's home base is in the US. Most of the, partners that they're working with are in the US. The trials at Stanford and Duke University and so on. So I'm not quite sure. I mean, they've done some trials in India, right? But I think it's still in a stage where FDA approval is approved in the US, but it's not approved in any other country. So for all these reasons, it might be best for Google to focus more on the US, develop the technology, scale it up in the US first, where people are more sort of willing to invest and adopt in new technology. It's not going to be cheap, right? So maybe a more cautious approach to rolling it out internationally is what I think might be good. But again, thank you to group number 7 for a nice efficient presentation. And now let's go on to the video presentation of group number 8.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being part of our presentation today. Good evening.
Sorry, I'm going to share my screen now.
Everyone, thank you for being part of our presentation today. My name is Stefan, and here we have the rest of the team, Julia, Rose, Pete, and Sofia, and we will present you our solution for the Verily case. First, we're going to start with defining the problems that Verily is facing, and next we're going to present a few possible solutions and their advantages and what we need to consider if we implement those solutions. And finally, we will give our recommendations and justifications how we should move forward. Let's start with a brief summary of the case. Verily is working on a smart contact lens for diabetics that can monitor continuously the glucose levels in the tears of the patients, and currently the company has partnered with academic research institutions, science companies, and hospitals and health systems. As we learned, data is a key asset that drives the development of the technology for Google, and Verily, and by using machine learning and artificial intelligence, the company's algorithms can analyze a large amount of data and uncover patterns and correlations in a very short time in comparison with the standard manual analysis performed by skilled analysis. Verily aims ambitiously to develop a tool that collects and organizes data and to provide health professionals with accurate and secure health data and insights for holistic care management. We identified a few problems that we want to address, and given the time frame, we'll concentrate on the following. How can we monetize the algorithms? How do we build higher barriers to entry for new competitors? And how to gain access to data created efficiently?
Thank you, Stefan. I will get started with the first problem that we defined. Verily has the opportunity to either sell the technology developed to an interested organization and relinquish its rights to the technology in a brownfield approach. On the other hand, it could try to create a new business model to support its technology and try to find an alternative way of monetizing their algorithm as part of a greenfield strategy. Now, both of these strategies have their respective advantages and disadvantages, which I am going to present to you in the following. The first option will provide Verily with a large sum of money from the technology sale at a dedicated point in time. They will be able to calculate their development and staff expenses together with a profit margin of their choice. In the end, this means for Verily that they will know exactly what they will get and therefore which amount of money they can calculate with when they decide their R&D budget for future projects. It's definitely the more secure, less investment requiring, and all in all faster option to receive the compensation for the development expenses of their technology. On the downside, this option is very inflexible in the sense that Verily will have to orient itself on the market pricing. They also have a sizable amount of competitors with similar technologies, so it may prove difficult to sell at the price that they expect. For the second option, Verily will have to develop a new business model for the monetization of their technology. This means they will be looking for alternative ways to sell, rent out, license, or subscribe healthcare organizations or individual doctors to use their technology. This opens up the very attractive opportunity to receive recurring revenue over a period of time rather than a one-time payment. Verily will also be more flexible in the design of their offer and how to compete against similar technologies. However, they will have to spend time and resources in developing such a model. They will have to closely mirror what competitors are doing, and of course, it will be significantly more difficult to determine a price for their offer. It is also much riskier of an endeavor since they can never be sure about the exact number of customers they will be able to sell the product to and how long it will take to compensate for their development expenses. Finally, our recommendation for Verily regarding the choice of their business model is the following. Rather than selling their algorithm alone, we believe that a far greater opportunity for revenue lies in conjoining the technology with the hardware needed to use it. Verily could partner with a OEM to develop a camera that will have Verily's algorithm already integrated into it. We would also recommend to offer to rent out these cameras on a subscription base to primary care physicians and clinics. This way, they can secure recurring revenue and simultaneously reduce the risk of professionals shying away from a high acquisition cost. They should focus their marketing efforts towards primary care providers, since optometrists and specially trained eye doctors will understandably have less of a need for the product, seeing as they will already have a camera for eye examinations at their disposal and their own knowledge to conduct the screening. For primary care facilities, the technology opens up a whole new line of business on the other hand, and they can therefore be seen as a valuable investment when buying the product from Verily. To finalize their offered solution, Verily could offer the untrained primary physicians training sessions on how to use the tool correctly and provide them with continued maintenance support. Like this, we believe Verily will be able to maximize its profits in connection to its retinopathy technology.
Finally, considering our business strategy, how do we build barriers to entry for our business model? One of the things is increasing the switching cost and barriers that usually are monitored by their nature, but they can be psychological and effort-based. The advantage is when we build these switching costs are like, it builds higher profit potential for Verily and increases the customer loyalty, brand awareness. And it's important to having this switching cost are like consumers are less likely to switch to another brand, to another competitor. Natural challenges are that creating these barriers costs, and it might feel that the customer loyalty is somehow forced. The next one is we will use the first mover advantage and generally aggressive, active marketing and branding in our marketing actions. The advantages are it builds trust and awareness, and in the best case scenario, we will become a staple of the industry, just like Netflix has become a synonym for streaming services. Challenges, as before stated, it is very costly, and being pioneer is always very risky. There's no room for mistakes. How do we get these barriers? We will use the SAFE framework as a core in every marketing actions that we have, instead of the classic 4 Ps. We will have solution, access, value, and education throughout the whole funnel that we have. Like stated, it's hard to have intellectual property for algorithms, but it's important to try to have some patents and licenses if it's possible for our technology advancements, and use the FDA authorization as a stamp of approval. Building brand awareness and equity, we will target clinics before our competitors, use referrals and the healthcare networks, get the word of mouth, and attending different healthcare conferences and fairs, and use the endorsement branding Google. It's important to use the possibilities that you have in your own network. And like stated, the SAFE model will go throughout the content marketing, CEO, and probably some goodwill campaigns and discounts for the lesser areas, for example, in Africa and other places. And it's important that the Verily brand is visible throughout every action. And like I said before, creating these barriers and building high brand awareness and equity. And in best case scenario, we become a synonym for the whole service.
Lastly, about the data access and curation. So the problem with accessing and curating the data is that the data collecting process is often time consuming and overall a rigid process in the healthcare system. Collecting and using the data always needs the respondent's consent. Acquiring the data from the healthcare providers, such as hospitals, is in neither an easy process. After the data is collected, the problem lies in transforming and integrating all the data to fit the same format to be able to utilize it. The solution for that would be to create a standardized platform for collecting the data. The advantages of this solution would be that the additional services like a data collecting platform would also encourage customers' willingness to use the solution with overall ease of use and simpleness. The users of the platform would also be obligated to use a specific format, so all the data would be in the same form. However, this solution involves some challenges. The solution does not solve the underlying privacy and consent issues, since it is not possible to acquire data without the respondent's consent. The customers might also have some issues in integrating their own prior data to the platform. Although the platform would make customers' data collection easier and simpler, it might also be challenging for some to learn to use the new platform.
So then on to the last recommendation, which is in response to the data access and curation issue. We identified one central actionable recommendation, which is for Verilight to endorse a software as service business model. More specifically, we suggest for Verilight to build a software for data collection and curation, which will be sold to medical businesses as a service. This service wouldn't only entail the actual software, but also support and training services. And while support services do require constant human monitoring, training is relatively easy to arrange through either live video or perhaps a pre-recorded set of instructions to save time, money, and effort. All collected data would be synced with the Verilight's own databases to allow for easy data integration and quick service development. For the software as a service model to function seamlessly, the software should be built around a multi-tenant architecture. This means that it should have multiple different versions of the same software, which allow for customer-based customization. So, for instance, clients could pick and choose from a list of services that are offered in their specific location. However, these would all be controlled from a central Verilight server, which would make it easier to make alterations or updates, etc. to the product. We also suggest for them to utilize a monthly-based subscription to the software to encourage buying, as no large upfront investment is required, and thus the barriers to purchase are decreased. It would also be possible to utilize this solution with the hardware-software recommendation mentioned earlier, and thus offer an even more content-rich service for the customers. Importantly, this business model would require for the customers to obtain signatures from patients to then allow data sharing to overcome any privacy issues mentioned earlier.
And the final recommendation from Rose, our presentation has concluded. We are looking forward to hear from you. What do you like about our presentation, and what do you think we should improve? Thank you for your attention.
Okay, so we had a presentation from group number 8. I would like to ask for comments, positive comments. What did you guys like about their presentation? Let's start out with that. And you can use the chat or you can use the microphone. So Ina says, very thorough analysis that was clearly presented and well justified recommendations. Nice job. Yeah, thank you Ina for setting the ball rolling. Clearly this was a very strong presentation. But I'd like everybody to contribute to the comments. So what else did you like about the presentation? Tommy says the different business models and their advantages and disadvantages were clearly presented. Also, recommendations were very clear overall, and I think the board of the company would have good insights to make a decision. So Tommy liked the analysis, all the advantages and disadvantages of each of the alternatives. And Tam says very detailed and comprehensive. I think you guys try to cover all issues mentioned in the case. Okay, so people are impressed by the comprehensiveness and the level of detail of this presentation. So let me now add some of my own comments. I think the structure was very strong. You had 3 defined problems and you took each one, you suggested alternatives, discussed their advantages and disadvantages and made a recommendation. And you did that 3 times. That clearly gave the impression that there are many issues and you have dealt with all of them. So I would like to now go to some slides and make some more specific comments. So I thought the beginning introduction was very strong, as well as at the end the summary. You know, both are like bookends. You have to start strong and you have to finish strong. And I think Stefan's speech, both at the top and the end of the presentation, was very well delivered. In fact, I think all the speakers were very polished, and I liked that most of you added to what the bullet points were written. You know, that's always the sign of a sophisticated presenter, is don't repeat what's exactly on the bullet point, but try to add value by amplifying it. And I think many of you did that. I loved the embedded video of all the speakers. You had such great cameras, or the clarity and resolution of those embedded videos was really high. And it always helps me to see the names associated with the faces. So that's some feedback I'd given to earlier groups. I'm glad that you took that into account. It made a very good impression. Now let me go to the problems themselves. So you see the first problem is more about the short term, what to do about the digital retinopathy algorithm. But do you see how problems 2 and 3 are much longer term in terms of, you know, there are some deeper issues about the business model separate from just this DR algorithm. So this team has looked into those, you know, how do you create barriers to entry, because, you know, somebody else could come in and undercut you in the marketplace. And then what do you do to, you know, the whole technology is based on gathering lots of data and different, you know, people in the population. So it has to depend, you know, this is a very critical supply input. So if you want to keep the business model going, you have to make it easy for people to provide the data. So that's what I like about this problem definition, is right off the bat it tackles the short term as well as the longer term problems with the business model. Let's go on some more to, okay, so this was similar to the first group, brownfield versus greenfield, and all of these advantages and disadvantages were quite clear. And it's interesting that this team, I understood this as being more of a brownfield recommendation, which is different than the first team, I mean group number 7, because you are partnering with OEMs. That's quite a good insight, because the software can't run on its own. So you do have to have a camera, and it has to be a very sophisticated high-end camera. So, partnering with the OEM is important, which is more like working with existing players in the industry, which to me sounds more like brownfield. Again, they did address the targeting issue. They want to market to primary care providers. So at least there is a focused target market. But I would like to return to this issue later, because I think this is one of the hardest part of the case. And, we have different choices: primary care physicians versus optometrists and ophthalmologists. And then we have different sizes of clinics and hospitals. So after we finish all 3 presentations, I will get back to the targeting issue. So this was quite clear. I would have liked to see some recommendation of a specific partner. So, it would have been nice to know whom they should pursue. And, there may be some good camera makers out there in the medical field that would form this. So the more specific and actionable the recommendation, the more useful it would be to management to know who is a partner they might go after. Okay. And then
that will have Verily's algorithm already in.
Sorry. Let's go on further.
We would also recommend to offer to rent out these cap.
Yeah, so in terms of the building the entry barriers, increasing switching costs, it's always good, but again, how do you build switching costs is my question. Specifically, how would you go about trying to build switching costs into the relationship? You could do it through better customer service, so that, if Verily is providing the best customer service, then there's a switching cost to go to somebody else. Or you could do it technically, if you have some kind of proprietary system that's built into the camera, the software and the camera have to work together, then, you can't just switch the software provider and use the camera, you have to replace both. So that's the switching cost. So it would be nice to get a more specific recommendation on how the switching cost should be built.
They are monitored by their nature, but they can be psychological and
Yeah, and the data issues are important, and I will come back to that when we look at Group 9's presentation, because they had also some recommendations about the data curation aspect. So again, I think, this was a very strong presentation. I liked it, and I would encourage you all to keep up that same level of interest and in your future work. Let's go on to one last round for constructive critique. Anybody would like to offer any areas of improvement for group number 8, whose video we have just seen? So I don't see any more forthcoming comments or critiques. So let me request anybody from group number 8 to react to any of the feedback that's been provided on the chat or by me.
Yes, I'm here from group 8. I just wanted to say thank everybody so much for the lovely feedback. There were so many nice comments. It was really uplifting, and thank you so much for the very constructive criticism. So yeah, thank you for taking the time.
Thank you. Very good. Now we shall go to group number 9's video presentation. Let me share my screen.
Now it's recording. Okay.
Hello. Our project is Machine Learning and the Diabetic Retinopathy Project. We are Group 9. Our team consists of myself, Pankaj Kela, Tommy, Anna, and Ina. The background of the project. The mission of Verily Life Sciences is make the world's health data useful so that people enjoy healthier lives. One of the diseases in the world is diabetic retinopathy, and it is a leading cause of blindness in the working age population. The screening test for diabetic retinopathy uses retinal photography, and it is simple, safe, and validated and acceptable. Also, effective treatment is available for patients identified through early detection. And we have good news. The algorithm developed based on deep machine learning had high sensitivity and specificity for detecting referable diabetic retinopathy. Next slide, please. So coming to the main problem, what is the suitable business model to deploy and monetize this successful machine learning algorithm of our diabetic retinopathy project? This main problem we look at through 4 questions. How can we get a more efficient access to data? Second question, how can we efficiently curate data to further advance the algorithm creation? Next, how do we create trust for machine learning in healthcare? And finally, what do we need to consider in strategy making to ensure growth opportunities in future for diabetic retinopathy project? Tommy, please.
Thank you. So the first question is, how do we get an efficient access to the data? So there are certain challenges in accessing the data. First of all, it takes a lot of time, money, and other resources to make separate contracts with each hospital. And but like lobbying, etc., could make the privacy issue policies, company bureaucracies, etc., that are kind of hindering the negotiations less demanding, and to make the negotiations also easier. However, there can be also problems when opening ways to competitors, which can create mistrust among customers and also impose some safety risks because the data is spread between many entities. So we should be open to discuss about the data privacy and the cost benefit of sharing it. So in order to tackle this problem, lobbying together with the competitors for the security laws around data privacy could make the data more accessible for everyone in a safe way. And making the data processing cycle transparent would create trust among entities and strengthen also the movement towards using machine learning in this context. And finally, so this would all work as a two-way road where different relationships and networks are working together. Next slide. Thank you. So we would create strategic alliances with original equipment manufacturers. In here, the selected team focuses on negotiations and networking. And with this, we would get the attention of decision makers. Then we would create partnerships with hospitals and communicate security standards to them and to other data sources. Then we would also organize the data collection trials and tests. And this would be done to secure different safety problems and make the transformation a bit easier. And finally, we would create relationship-specific investments and assets because these relationships create more value to the society, because the value of this is greater within the relationships than if the different entities keep them as themselves. So sharing is caring. Next.
Okay, so how can we efficiently curate data to advance the algorithm creation? Data curation is an important process in the this entire model, because usable data by the machine learning algorithm is a critical resource. Also, data from different sources needs to be pre-processed and organized in a standard format. The different sources could be different hospitals, patients with different types of diabetes, and also different research institutions. The processed data needs to be stored in a data warehouse and merged with other data sets. Also, different parts of the stored data has a scope to be accessed by different teams, for example, within Verily for different research projects, or also combined with different other data types, for example, data types of heart rate or blood-related issues, etc. So to enable this, four important action points are design thinking. We need to be explicitly mindful of the technology, business, and human factors. Modularity in design. We need to anticipate the future requirements and complexity possible with future iterations of the model. It is also important to have ease of data testing and validation. And here it is useful to have in-house as well as third-party access to data when required. Finally, the database architecture should have a common standard that is aligned across different Verily projects, as well as aligned with the Google standards. Next, I request Anna.
Yes, so how to create trust then? Well, one important thing for gaining trust is to involve the professionals in the machine learning processes, telling them and showing them how it works, providing them with statistics and educating them on the data. This also includes telling them about the security and the other important issues related to the mistakes that the system might make or the lack of them. Second, we need to emphasize resource savings. Of course, it's obvious that this kind of system saves money, but then it will also save time and personnel, as employees then get the chance to do something more meaningful instead of doing these very manual tasks that the machine learning system could do for them. And lastly, we need to position the system in a more humane way. The system needs to be seen as a tool for decision making and not the sole decision maker. So finally, we can discuss our solutions. We suggest a demo trial period for the system to kind of get insights on how customers think about it, and then also the customers can get important insights for themselves via our algorithm. Additionally, we would create trust by customer recommendations or references that could we also embed on our website. And finally, as already mentioned, we think that it's important that the algorithm is kind of humane, and this means adding features to the system that emphasize that the algorithm is really only a helper and not the sole decision maker. And it's very crucial that the healthcare workers always feel like they are in charge instead of the algorithm. So now Ina will tell you about the next question.
So, which strategic actions would ensure future growth for the project? First of all, as Alphabet is now coordinating the health strategies between Google Health and Verily, there is a conflict as they have different goals and ways of getting there. This far, it is important to clearly distinguish the coordination between these firms. A well-thought coordination can create efficiency and vice versa. The biggest problem in the markets is the difficulty and costly access to the needed data for the project, as Tommy shared earlier. Otherwise, there is not that big of entry barriers, which is why Verily needs a way to protect its project. As there is already a rising level of competition in the healthcare markets and some focusing on diabetic retinopathy, there is a need to better position Verily's project against this competition. So we suggest that Verily should build entry barriers by creating a strong network effect, by taking the time to build relationships and networks with the hospitals. They should strengthen the brand value with strong marketing, customer service, and relationship creation. They should also look for a patent and invest in HR to hire the best people as their key resource. Verily should do strategy coordination with Google Health on matters like trust creation and network building, because these are among the greatest issues in the market, but also shared goals benefiting both of them. Verily should create a strong slogan to better position their project in the market, and our suggestion is helping doctors effortlessly screen diabetes-generated blindness. We compared different business models for the project and saw these two as the most plausible ones. Here we are comparing the software as a service and software licensing. The security is better with the software as a service because there are stronger security protocols in SaaS. However, the data privacy is stronger with the software license because the data is only hosted over the local machine and not uploaded to the web like in the SaaS option. With the SaaS, there is greater scope and control over the future algorithm improvements, and there is better possibilities to take care of the customer life journey because there would be no third party between Verily and the customer. The SaaS option also offers more scope on flexible pricing, which is important for a global product. With this comparison, we suggest the SaaS option as the business model.
So the implementation of such a business model would be, we would use the brownfield strategy, where it would make sense to start co-branding with existing brands and for example, brands that would produce health monitoring products. And this would create awareness in the public, and also the data privacy has to be strong and communicated to the public here as well, and it has to be transparent. And then we would also create a win-win-win partnerships with public and private healthcare entities, where also the Verily wins, the public healthcare wins, and also, most importantly, the people win. And we have also examined the potential value this model is creating. It is difficult to quantify the cost with the information available. There are also health budget constraints for different countries and patients. And the market size is 285 million, and 1 out of 3 of these people have signs of diabetic retinopathy. And the price range is kind of really difficult to say, but we have estimated to be maybe 10 to 100 euros or 50 to 100 euros. It's hard to say per patient. The biggest thing is that it creates value for many.
Yes. So to conclude our key recommendations. First, we need to implement strategic alliances and partnerships to ensure efficient data access. Second, we need to consider modularity and also design thinking to foster efficient data curation. And third, demo trials and customer references are good ways to build trust in machine learning. And then finally, we need to consider strategy coordination and positioning to ensure Verily's growth opportunities also in the future. So that was it, and thank you very much. And if you have any questions, we would be happy to answer them.
Thank you.
Okay, so we just saw Group 9's video presentation. So let's go to offering them some positive comments. What did you all like about Group 9's presentation?
I think it was a very good presentation and very well structured, great visuals, and the attention to detail was amazing. I would say they even considered the pricing, and so that there has been some research behind all that. it's kind of evident.
Thank you, Stefan. That's great. I agree that there's a lot of detail and comprehensive. So this team has done a lot of work and they deserve some praise for that. Petri says, I like the visual style and good structure of the presentation. The implementation and recommendations were very concrete and I think they will truly work. Okay. So Petri also liked the structure and the detailed recommendations. Anybody else would like to comment on the positive aspects of the presentation? Yeah, so let me also add my own comments. I did like the presentation. It was well thought out, lots of detail. The 4 questions that you had after the problem definition really delved deep into the issues. So that did show a lot of, analytical capability. I also liked the attention to the strategic issues and positioning. That was really something as a marketing person I'm very interested in. So that was good. So it was all in all comprehensive. Now let's go offer them some constructive critique on how to improve in the future. Any comments? Oh, I also liked how they introduced a lot of course concepts into some of the slides, the issues about design thinking, modularity and so on. So whenever you get a chance to introduce some theory into your case analysis and presentation, it always gives a better impression. Okay, so in terms of the critique part, let me set the ball rolling. So I think the front end of the video needed to be edited out because I heard Tommy ask, is it recording now? So I had mentioned this even to an earlier team. You guys are probably using either Zoom or Microsoft Teams to make your recording, but the next step up in video marketing is to learn how to edit video, and there are some very simple tools to trim the front or the back of it, because there are, most of the time we take some time to get into the beginning of the presentation, or at the end there are some other noises that might creep in. So look for some simple software that can help you to edit the program. I use something called Snagit, but there are many others available. Again, my pet peeve is that I like to see embedded video that was there. However, the names of the speakers were missing from the embedded video. And I also thought that there was some lack of consistency in the clarity of the embedded video. Most of the speakers were very clearly visible, but one of the cameras was a little bit hazy. So that did provide some contrast. Now let me get into the slides and comment on a few things specifically. trying to just load the video. Please bear with me. Okay, I hope you can now see the video. The slide I've frozen on is the title slide. So, you know, in the title, you're kind of, I think the title focuses entirely on diabetic retinopathy, but actually you've defined a little broader in terms of the problem definition. So maybe a little more general title would have been better, because this seems to indicate that you're only going to focus on digital retinopathy, but in terms of your actual questions beyond the algorithm, these 4 questions have to do much more with the longer term viability of the business model, right? How do you create efficient access to data? How can you improve the algorithm, right? How do we create trust in healthcare? I mean, that's such a big macro issue. It doesn't pertain only to digital retinopathy, right? So I think that the title could have been a little broader to show that you're focusing both on the immediate digital retinopathy problem as well as on the longer term overall business model problems. That's one comment I would make. Now, here's the thought. You know, there's even group number 8 talked about data access and data curation, and clearly it's a very messy subject. You know, it's challenging. There are privacy issues, right? Sensitivity of the topic. Nobody wants the whole world to know that they're suffering from any particular disease, right? So when you have to develop the future of machine learning and you need access to such large volumes of data, you know, one of the issues to keep in mind is to borrow from another industry which already has been in existence for a long time, which is the marketing research industry. And how do we collect data in marketing research, whether it's focus groups or surveys? There's some compensation provided to the participants. I think you all may have participated in some surveys or focus groups where you're paid for your data. And that's the kind of longer term solution that I would like to put into, you know, on your radar screen, is that if you really want to make this efficient and get large volumes of data, you know, we've already seen in industries like social media and Facebook and, you know, digital advertising that people are making trade-offs between privacy and getting some value out of giving up that privacy. And so I think we need to maybe think about compensating people for getting access to their data. It's a radical idea, but it's something that some people in the industry are talking about. So I just like to, you know, offer that to all the groups, not just this group. But if you want to improve machine learning, you have these obstacles of, you know, user sensitivity and privacy, then maybe compensation for the data is something that might help, because in any case, you know, Verily is going to probably also sell the, you know, if it buys the data or compensates the users, then it could also make a revenue model out of offering the data to many other research institutions and the other projects that they're working on. Okay, this was good, similar to group number 8, having alliances with OEM manufacturers. I'd like to know which OEM manufacturer would be a good camera partner. Again, partnerships with hospitals. I'd like to know which partnerships you might be recommending. There's some data in the case about their existing partnerships, right? And given their location in, in the San Francisco Bay Area, Silicon Valley, there are some really good hospitals, like Stanford Hospital is very close by. They're already doing work with them. So those are the kinds of specific recommendations that might be made, is to cultivate, deeper relationships with Stanford or UCSF in other areas apart from digital retinopathy. Right. I think that this team has done a great job of focusing on the trust issue. I didn't see that in group 7 or group 8, but absolutely this whole business model in general, it has to depend on building trust, and they had some great recommendations. I loved the positioning that, the specific note I made is machine learning is a tool for decision making. It is not the decision maker. That's the message that has to be repeated again and again to all the healthcare professionals. And in that respect, again, I think this call to action helps to build trust. All these three, you demonstrate the product to healthcare professionals, they understand it, existing customers endorse it, and then getting this message across that this algorithm is not the decision maker, but it's just a tool. These are the things that will build the trust. So not only did they bring up the issue, but they had some very specific recommendations on how to build it.
Demo trial period for the system.
That's something that I think was very effective.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for...
Lost my screen here. Yeah, then, the strategic coordination aspects, we've got Google Health, we've got Verily, and now they've hired some high-level executive to, coordinate between the two units. I think that so far Google Health has delved more into the data aspects, electronic medical records and getting those partnerships going, and Verily has focused more on the algorithms and the technology, but there has to be some more cooperation between the two so that they don't duplicate efforts and can help get some synergies going. Positioning is an important issue which I've already touched on with regard to the trust. And of course, I love any kind of slogan, right? So I appreciate that this team has developed this slogan, helping doctors to effortlessly screen diabetes-generated blindness. However, I think that the earlier positioning is much more powerful. Machine learning is a tool for decision making. It's not the decision maker. That is the one message that I would repeat in the slogan. The issue of building trust, to me that seems more at a empathic or at a more psychological level resonates with doctors more than this one is more, it's more rational type of positioning, right? It helps doctors to effortlessly screen diabetes generated blindness. It's very obvious. The other one is more of a emotional trust building one. So I prefer the previous slogan to, or make that into a slogan. That would be my recommendation. So those are some of the comments that I had in terms of, trying to refine some of these things. But all in all, it was a really good effort, and I appreciate all the time and effort that this team has put into it. Let me give another chance to anybody who would like to offer any comments for group number 9. You can use the chat or you can use the microphone. I don't see any more comments coming from the class, so I would like to now request anybody from group number 9, would you like to react to any of the feedback that's been provided?
Yes, thank you for the very valuable feedback, both positive and then what we could do better. This definitely was maybe the hardest case, and we did struggle with finding the correct problems to tackle with. So sort of outlining the problems. Some of the feedback was with the issues was something that we did recognize making it, and some were definitely things that we didn't even recognize, like the thing with the headline of the whole presentation. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ina, for your comment and reaction. So now let's go on to a broader discussion beyond the 3 group presentations. A couple of you commented this was a hard case, and it's true. I think it's hard for a couple of different reasons. One is that it's really about healthcare, which is an industry we know maybe as consumers, but this is all about the back end stuff. So that's something not very familiar to most people. That may be what's making it hard. It's also a business to business case, right? So there's a lot of those things that need to be addressed, like the targets and the channels and so on. So that makes it hard. And then just the technical aspects of what exactly is machine learning and what exactly is digital retinopathy. So it is hard, but again, I hope you see that the power of high-tech marketing is that it applies to so many different industries and so many different business situations. It's a nascent, evolving technology. How do you start marketing something that was going to evolve rapidly in the next few years? Those are the challenges. Now let's move on. What are some of the issues in the case that may have not come up so far that might merit some discussion? Are there other issues that you would like to bring up, either things that somebody may have written in their memos, or maybe you're curious, something was hard and maybe we can spend some time clarifying it a little bit? So let's throw it open to other questions and issues about the Verily case in general.
So One was, I think there was the assumption that because Verily is working on so many different projects, like this was one of their 11 projects or 13 projects or something like that. And then Verily comes under Google Health comes under Alphabet. So there is a lot happening there. So it was kind of an assumption that they are interested in monetizing this project. In the study itself, it was not clearly evident that what they are looking to do with this algorithm. Of course, they want to make money out of it, but then it also seemed that it's just a small project within a multiple layers. So so they are not going to be focused only on this project. They're going to be doing a number of other things. And then like compared to the previous cases of Zoom or L'Oreal, it's clear that's their product and that is what they need to do with it. With this product, it was so like particularly like initially we discussed a lot of different things. Then we just decided, okay, we are going to focus on diabetic retinopathy, and that's close the box there. Let's not get too far away from this, because after all, that's discussed in a lot of detail in the project. So something certainly has to be done around that. But then do we focus on putting that project in Verily's context, or do we take it to the market? That was kind of a yeah. So I think the challenge initially for us as a team was closing the box on that project and just sticking with that.
Yeah, and I think that is the major issue. If that wasn't addressed, it would be off the mark. So I think you did a good job on that. Let's talk a little bit about the organizational context, since you brought it up, the history of how Verily has evolved. As you noted, originally it was a part of Google X, right? That we know from the case. And Google X is was the part of, or even now there is still a Google X. It's the part of Google that takes on the highest risky projects. Okay, so Google X does projects like providing internet service through balloons that float in the atmosphere. So when some project has a little more traction, then they want to spin it off, because all the projects within Google X are completely cost centers. There's no pressure to monetize them. But the projects that have a little bit of market value, they are then spun off as a separate company like Verily. And the reason is because they are closer to monetization. And so that's the history of it, is that now the Google wants Verily to generate revenue and be self-sufficient in the long term. Otherwise, it would have stayed within Google X. The Google X metrics they don't have to do anything to do with revenue generation. They are more technological progress milestones within Google X. But when you spin it off as a Verily, that's when the need for monetization becomes important. But as you rightly pointed out, there are some 11 or 13 different projects, and probably the digital retinopathy is the most far along. They've got the FDA approval, which is a major progress. So now they are allowed to market it. Without that approval, they couldn't even market it. So that's a little bit about the background, why there is pressure on monetizing the digital retinopathy algorithm. However, you know that you cannot be a one-trick pony to be sustainable in the long run, and you have to do things for that are your core competencies. It's in machine learning and in data mining and all of that. So those things have to continue to evolve. Those capabilities have to be improved upon for the longer term, and those issues were addressed by the presentation. So I think you did a good job. Okay, any other issues that you would like to bring up? So as I said in one of the groups, I want to focus more on the targeting issue for the digital retinopathy algorithm. If monetizing is important, then definitely the two most important aspects of marketing strategy are target market and positioning, right? And there were some recommendations. I remember group 8 said that they would like to focus on primary care physicians, right? But there are also other alternatives. So I want to throw this open to everybody and say, let's think of this as a B2B company, and it's first and foremost going to target institutions. So there's health clinics and hospitals, right? So what would be the most kind of easiest way to segment the market in terms of the institutions or organizations? Any thoughts there? What kind of health clinics or hospitals would be more receptive to installing or buying the software and the cameras for digital retinopathy? Any thoughts?
I mean, one is of course the diabetic hospitals where the diabetes is being considered, and then so it's a bit tricky because there is the data says that one in 3 have some eye related issue, like 1 in 3 diabetes type 2 patients have some eye related issue, and then one of those 3 can have a vision loss level of issue. So but if we take it as 1 in 3, so we have in terms of patient numbers, it is about I think it is about 95 million patients world over. To segment it by hospitals,
I think to simplify it, let's focus on the US first, because
Right.
that is the most immediate market. Let's leave out the rest of the countries until the algorithm is better or the unit costs come down. So think about it in the US. What would be some ways of thinking about the target in the US? So you mentioned diabetes, right? Now diabetes is very prevalent. It's a very common ailment, right? As soon as you reach a certain age, the chances of becoming diabetic are pretty high. But you also mentioned about which are the hospitals or clinics that are going to have a larger scale, right? You want to see a larger number of people with DR. That's where it's going to be efficient to apply this technology, right? So in that case, you might use, the size of the clinic or the hospital as a simple demographic. There are small clinics, there are medium clinics, and there are large hospitals. So I think that one important guide is that you should go after the largest hospitals and clinics, because they will have the scale to appreciate the economics of the technology. And there are so many small clinics and small primary care physicians. They see a lot of patients, but not the scale of DR patients. So as a simple first variable, would you agree that, they got to target the larger hospitals and clinics, not all of them? And now if you restrict your market to the larger hospitals and clinics, you have to try to understand how the patient referrals take place, right? Usually a patient will first go to the primary care physician. Then if the primary care physician is not able to handle, whatever special problems that the patient has, then they refer them to specialists, right? So my question is, do you target this at the primary care physicians or at the optometrists or at the ophthalmologists? These are all the kind of distribution channel of the service. And so I'm trying to raise the question is, sure, all the diabetes patients will first come to the PCP. But then also remember, as consumers of ordinary vision problems, lens corrections, we don't go to the PCP to get our eyes tested. The PCP says if you're having a vision problem, go to the optometrist. Right? It's the optometrist that is trained to do the screening of your vision. If they'll show you all the letters on a screen, and if you can't read them all, then they'll give you a prescription for eyeglasses or contact lens. To me, it's somewhat similar in digital retinopathy. This is a specialized area, and PCPs are handling all the simple stuff like colds, coughs, flu, and even diabetes at an ordinary level. But if they encounter diabetes 1 or diabetes 2, and though there are blood tests for that, then they should immediately refer them for further screening. I personally don't think the PCPs are a good target for this kind of technology, because they are not trained. Now, I mean, you can train them, but is that necessary? Isn't the optometrist the right place where they are trained to look at the insides of the eye? They have already some equipment, and they are the people who will then look at the initial digital images from the algorithm, and even then they might further refer them to the ophthalmologist to confirm should there be any doubts about false positives and false negatives. So again, I'm just raising this issue. It's, what do you guys think about where the efforts of Google in terms of targeting clinics and hospitals should be? Any thoughts? So again, just to summarize, we have to leave out all the small and medium clinics and hospitals, because they are not lead users, and they probably are not willing to make those kinds of investments on an untested technology with a lot of uncertainty. It's the larger clinics and hospitals that do that. And within that larger, institutions which will have the scale, they want, they are the leading edge of practice, and they want to explore new technologies. For them, the investment is not such a big deal. But then the issue is, within that sector, like a large hospital, where do you start building the trust? Who's to be the target? Is it to be the PCP? Is it to be the optometrist? Or is it to be the ophthalmologist? And generally my feeling is that it should be the optometrists and the ophthalmologists, the people who specialize in digital retinopathy. They are the likely ones to be early adopters. And the PCPs are already doing so much, they are handling a large volume of general simple cases. So whenever it comes to, oh, here's here's a test for diabetes and you seem to have this, then there's a chance that you might have DR, let me refer you to an optometrist. Because then, if you do the screening at the PCP level, it will again have to be duplicated at the optometrist or ophthalmologist level. So there's going to be increased cost if you have a longer distribution channel. If you skip the PCP and the PCP directly refers you to the optometrist to do the screening, then you are doing the cost only at one place. And so again, it might be more efficient to target the people who are mainly dealing with digital retinopathy rather than the PCP. So that's something that I would like to bring up for your consideration. Any thoughts or reactions? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it definitely does make sense, and it's an issue that we at least didn't even realize to think about. So that's good, a good thing to add to this whole case.
Thank you, Ina. So yeah, I'm a marketing guy and I look at things from a strategy point of view. If monetization is the goal, let's talk about target market, let's talk about positioning. I love the team 9 when they say that, it's all about building trust, and that's the positioning aspect. But then you have to look at whom to target the message to, because just saying doctors is too general, and that may require some industry specific knowledge of this, how the distribution channel works. But in my opinion, in B2B channels, the shorter the channel, the less the cost and the more efficient the delivery of the service. If you go on to many tiers of channels, then the cost to the end consumer is going to be higher in some way, shape or form. Okay, any other closing thoughts? Any other aspect of the case that you would like to bring up that's not been brought up yet? So it was a good discussion. Thank you all for your participation. Again, I will ask Luke to distribute the Uber case to all of you, and then I will see you all hopefully on the 13th of December. We'll be discussing more about AI, machine learning, blockchain, and then do an application to Uber, the car share company. Thank you all. Have a good night, and I'll see you in another week or so. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.